Yes, I can press that button. Let me not do it right now, though. Let's wait till we're ready to start the actual content. Unless, Austin, are you ready? Maybe give folks a few more minutes.
Got the presentation up and running. I'm working single screen, so if stragglers want to come on, they can. But if we want to start the recording right now, that would be fine. And then anyone who wants access to this, we'll send out a link to the list of attendees on the Splunk users group page at the completion of this. So I'd like to start it off. I'm Austin Rose. I'm the CDT Security Solutions Engineering Manager. I've been in that role for about 9 months now. Prior to that, I worked in the Security Solutions Group, and then also the Department of Technology's Security Operations Center, where I helped start that up as well. So I've been working with the state for just coming up on 3 years in July. Before that, I did project management and a bunch of other stuff at other companies. So we'll get going here. So the agenda for today, we'll do a simple round of introductions to the hosts. So the Splunk users group hasn't been very active in the past 2 years or so. So my goal, with the help of the Splunk engineers that are currently attending, was to kind of re-kickstart and refresh this users group. I know that a lot of the things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis with Splunk are not unique, and especially at this kind of local regional level, there's a lot of resources just within the community that we can reach out to, and share ideas, share thoughts, and share strategy. And that's going to be one of the things that I'm talking about today. After that, so I'll do the first presentation for a novel approach to security monitoring use case development. And that's kind of what CDT has been working on behind the scenes to get our SOC up and running and maturing as quickly as we can. And then I'll hand it over to Blake, and he'll be doing a presentation on remote work insights and how Splunk is using Splunk to kind of gain some insights into what the remote work looks like at Splunk right now. After that, we'll do some open discussion and requests for presentations moving forward. This is a users group, and so while I'm very thankful for Splunk kind of helping kickstart, I would like, in the next users group, whether it be a monthly or quarterly event, to get some feedback and some presentations from the group. It doesn't have to be very deep and meaningful. It can be like a very simple, this is how we deployed TA NICs, or this is how we created this dashboard, or an executive report or something like that. Something that for everyone that's attending, we've got a lot of different skill levels, a lot of different experience levels, and someone may find something as simple as creating dashboards to be very beneficial. So looking for those. So if you have ideas, we can discuss them at the end as well. All right, so kind of already introduced myself. I am the kind of chief Splunk guru at Department of Technology at the moment. I did the primary architecture and design for our Splunk self-managed AWS environment. And so we are currently running a multi-site cluster up in the cloud, and we've seen a lot of good success with that. So if anyone ever has any questions on how to deploy Splunk into the cloud, but not leverage Splunk Cloud, more than happy to share some of my insights and a lot of those lessons learned. And probably be a good topic for a discussion at a future users group. I'm also a GIAC certified incident handler with SANS, and I'm also on the SANS advisory board. If you want to get a hold of me, that's my state.ca.gov email address. Feel free to send me, any kind of talking points, or if you're looking for assistance with anything, just be advised I receive probably about 200 emails a day. So if it takes a little bit for me to get back to you, don't be offended. Next up, we've got Blake. Blake, if you want to say a few words about yourself.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, Blake Hughes. I've been with Splunk for about 1 year now. I live here in Sacramento, and I cover maybe 1/3 to 1/2 of the state agencies and departments in California. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Blake. And then next we have Lily.
Hi there, Lily Rodriguez. I support state, local, and higher ed. I'm out of the Bay Area, so I'm right near the Oakland airport. I've been a sales engineer most of my career, and I look forward to helping anyone that wants to gain more adoption of Splunk. Feel free to reach out to me. Just lrodriguez@splunk.com if you want to reach me by email. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. And last but not least, sorry, Gina. It looks like the default template that I was using whited everything out.
I'm Gina, and my background is blank.
Yeah, I can fix that.
Yep. It's totally okay. So, hey, everyone. It looks like some of my customers have joined. I support the state here in Sacramento for Splunk for about 2 years. Proud to be a veteran of the United States Air Force. Been in IT for about 27 years. And I am definitely looking forward to getting this users group active again. And we just want to promote again for all of our customers. We'd love to have you, do a presentation for 15 to 30 minutes on how you use Splunk, what the benefits are, and we really want to start getting our customers talking to each other so that we can leverage each other's knowledge and experience. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you, Gina. So we'll start off. So today I'd like to talk to everyone and kind of give a presentation on a novel approach to security monitoring use case development as it kind of exists within Department of Technology right now. Standard disclaimer, I am here as Austin Rose. I'm not here as an official representative of any state agency, so the views expressed are my own. And then most importantly, I like the bottom sentence here, please do not hold us to these ideas in perpetuity. This is definitely a case of we are learning a lot as we go along, and that's the important part of everything that we're doing is to take something away from it, to take the good stuff away, improve upon it, and kind of move forward in the future. So this is what I want to talk about today. One is the problem. What is the problem with use case development, and what is the problem as I see it in cybersecurity? And then we'll talk about some of the specific frameworks that we're using to kind of help address that problem and trying to kind of, herd the cattle, as it were, when it comes to use case development and understanding what our security posture is and addressing overall risk in the cybersecurity realm. What you'll notice is that this is not a specific to Splunk problem. And so my slide deck is very light when it doesn't even mention Splunk, but just know that my experience in implementing this kind of framework of frameworks is specific to Splunk. So I can answer any questions at the end specific to that. So William J. Lynn III, he was the former Deputy Secretary of Defense. He said something very meaningful, I felt, and he said, over the past 10 years, the frequency and sophistication of intrusions into US military networks have increased exponentially. He wrote that in 2010, and here we are in 2020, and while there is no, good source of documentation out there on, the number of intrusions into military networks, I think that, if you've been a security practitioner over the past 10 years, you've probably seen the same thing. And so after 10 years, the number of attacks or the number of sophisticated, hacks and compromises we've seen, publicly and probably internally, has just gone up year over year. So the problem is that cybersecurity, you are facing an unknown enemy. They can be anywhere in the world. They could be next door. They could be standing outside connecting to your Wi-Fi. And so this is a problem without bounds. And generally speaking, your enemy or your adversary is going to be better funded and have more resources, because really what they're doing is, cybersecurity is one thing. That is the organization trying to protect itself, but they're trying to protect themselves from the entire world. And when it comes to cyber attacks and things like that, you're really crowdsourcing the issue at that point. You've got APT groups and you've got other, kind of like anonymous type evangelists out there that are doing, cyber warfare at scale, but they're crowdsourcing it across nation states, and other different organizations. So cybersecurity is a global conflict that is waged 24/7 by script kiddies and nation states alike. And that's the problem. But with every problem come a thousand solutions, right? I'm sure we've all had interactions with vendors coming to us and saying, I've got a solution for you. All we have to do is plug this box into your network and you are protected. Again, personal opinions. I feel that a lot of those solutions just introduce more problems. And in reality, they don't necessarily fit your exact environment. And so having, you know, they talk about the security in layers, or the onion approach. What we're talking about today is right in line with that idea. You take a look at a typical organization, you probably have somewhere between 10 to 15 security tools, and then you have maybe some security analysts, maybe you have a SOC, maybe you don't. But how is a 9-to-5 employee or a 24/7 SOC supposed to ingest and understand all of that data and make something meaningful out of it? This, you know, kind of farcical look at a SOC analyst workstation, you know, traditionally, when there isn't a effort to go to single pane of glass, this is kind of what you see. You know, you're going to have like a 24 monitor setup. You're going to have every dashboard provided by every single vendor on every single screen. And it's just absolutely overwhelming to a SOC analyst, let alone a SOC analyst who is new to cybersecurity, right? You've got things like IPSs and IDSs, and depending on how diverse your network is, you could have, you know, 5 to 10 vendors providing those services with 5 to 10 different interfaces. And that's problematic, because you know, if you have 24 screens in this image to view, you're going to miss something. So all that being said, what are we looking for when it comes to cybersecurity and some of those cyber attack methods? And what we've seen in the industry, especially over the past 8 years, is the MITRE Corporation out of Massachusetts. They developed the attack framework, which is the adversary tactic, techniques, and common knowledge framework. And so what they've done is they've created a knowledge base of everything that they've seen in real world observations. The nice thing about this framework is that it's completely moldable and it's updated continuously. So as of last night, there was 266 techniques to date, and they're even moving into something called pre-techniques, which is like the individual application of those techniques. So you're seeing a lot of different methods of how attacks can occur. And again, you know, your adversary is worldwide, and so they've got, you know, millions of more man hours than you do to protect your organization, to figure out how to get into your organization. So that's just overwhelming. So how do we start approaching this? You know, you've got the guys that are living in their basement, you know, the kind of stereotypical hacker guy. And then, you know, the ones that are probably a little bit more serious are the nation states. State of California is currently the 6th largest GDP in the world. And that it can be a very valuable target for different, you know, nation states out there to try and either undermine what we're trying to accomplish, or have other, you know, second and third order effects. So how do we manage this? You know, going from 260 techniques to what? What is the next step for this? So what there is out there, so the Dutch Payment Association through FISAC developed this management, growth, metrics, and assessment framework. And what this framework does is it takes these use cases, and a use case is really just kind of a how something is going to happen in your network, and it tries to drive the need for that through, you know, regimented requirements gathering. First and foremost, you know, this was developed by a financial or a fiduciary institution, and so some of the terms in the white paper, and there will be a slide with links at the very end of this, is kind of driven towards, you know, fiduciary responsibility and financial sector compliance. But I think some of the universal things that are applicable to everywhere is, you know, what are your business and compliance drivers for some of these use cases you're developing? You know, for Department of Technology, we routinely work with things like IRS 1075, other, FedRAMP requirements, mandates, and, even just state policy. So those are good like compliance use cases. Some business drivers could be, and the examples that the Dutch Payment Association provides is, if the bank gets hacked, they're going to lose money. So there could be a business driver associated with that as well. And while I'm speaking from a case of, state government, I think a lot of this applies to, local businesses and other, just kind of normal people as well. If your business gets hacked, what is the driver for protecting you? And for a lot of people, it's going to be lost financial gains. That moves into the threat landscape. So, further justification of what your threat landscape is, depending on what kind of sector intelligence you're subscribed to, you may have a better understanding of what the threat landscape for your specific sector is. And you want to, kind of mold your detections, especially in the beginning, towards the greatest threats or the greatest threat actors that could be acting against you. And then the last but not least, the third layer here, this implementation layer, is truly the nuts and bolts of how you are going to do this in your environment. What data do you need to perform these detections? Kind of my go-to example is brute force attack, right? So if you have a brute force attack, there are many different ways to execute a brute force attack, from password spraying to just brute strength, dictionary attacks, different things like that. But each one of those is going to have its own kind of fingerprint when you're looking through your logs or looking through your environment to try and find that event happening. And not only that, but every application that you're trying to monitor is going to have a different implementation too. So, if you are monitoring your environment for Windows brute force attacks, that's not going to cover you for your web application server or your WordPress site that also is susceptible to brute force. So how do you detect that, and what monitoring rules need to be in place to get that desired end state? And what's nice about this framework is it ties the detection to a business or compliance driver, which is a very easy thing to pull, a purse string on and say, in order for us to reduce risk in this specific area that's associated with this specific business driver, here are some steps we can take. So the great thing about frameworks, doesn't matter what framework, is it gives you a starting point to go from, and you make it your own as you move along. So what we've done is we've actually created a layer 4 use case. So what you see here is the first kind of layer is the context, and then you move into layer 1 and 2 framework, or layer 1 and 2 use cases, and layer 3. So the way that we have implemented this at Department of Technology is layer 1 is Lockheed Martin kill chain. We can map all attacks in one way or another to the Lockheed Martin kill chain. And then from under there, the layer 2 use case is a specific tactic, the MITRE ATT&CK. And then the layer 3 use case is the general technique that's used. And so what our layer 4 use case ends up being is basically the sub technique. And we were kind of doing this before the sub techniques went out into beta. But a sub technique at the layer 4 level would be a specific implementation for brute force. So we are going to look in WordPress logs for brute force attacks, or we are going to look at Windows logs for brute force attacks. And the nice thing about this whole framework is that it gives inherent reporting on up to show what areas you have strong coverage in, or areas that you may need to divert your attention to mitigate that risk, or focus in a new development cycle. And really what it brings is kind of managing a use case life cycle. So you've got the 4 kind of bits and pieces there. You've got onboarding, operational, maintenance, and offloading. So the idea is that you want to onboard a new use case. Say your organization is going to stand up a new WordPress site. Okay, well, what use cases can we develop that are specific to WordPress? Well, here are the, maybe the 10 different use cases that you can onboard when you onboard WordPress. That's like requirements gathering, that's understanding the log sources, what logs you actually have available to you. And then operational is actually like putting it into the hands of the SOC analyst, having that trigger in Splunk if you're using Enterprise Security, generating a notable event, or if you're using just bare Splunk Enterprise, have it, excuse me, just generating an alert. And then what happens? So if WordPress goes from version 4 to 5, does that log source change? What if you decide that you no longer want WordPress and you're going to go to some other content management system? Well, the maintenance and offloading pieces make sure that you're giving care and attention to those use cases over the life cycle of the organization and the life cycle of the products that are actually contextually in your organization, because you don't want Splunk running queries for WordPress sites if you don't have any in your site or in your organization for the past year. And so it gives you a nice life cycle kind of management approach into developing these use cases. And then metrics, right? Everybody needs to report metrics on up to someone somehow. And there's a lot of different discussions on whether or not security operations centers should have metrics associated with them. And I don't want to get in the middle of that, but what I want to show is that it's the third item in MaGMa, which is metrics, and it gives you the ability to have very substantial metrics that you can then report on up to show progress or to show areas of suggested improvement. So metrics can be, how many changes do you make in the last reporting period to your use cases? Or, maybe you started off with 10 use cases today, and in 6 months from now, your goal is to have 180 use cases. Now you can measure yourself on that actual development. And then the three metrics that are specific and they're actually within the framework itself is effectiveness, implementation, and coverage. So the effectiveness of a use case is really a ratio of, true positives to total alerts. That's something like that, right? Like, so if you have a brute force query or a brute force use case, and it's continually triggering on people who just skip or they miss their password twice and then they get it on the third time, well, maybe that's not an effective query because a lot of that isn't brute force. That's just very forgetful people in the organization. So you can reduce your effectiveness rating on that query and say, well, maybe we need to increase the threshold up to like 10 invalid login attempts, something like that. Implementation and coverage are very similar concepts, but they're distinct enough that they provide a good kind of duality in measuring those metrics. And so implementation is, if you are going to do Windows brute force logging, how many of your machines actually have, Windows event codes like 4625 and 4626 enabled? Well, okay, that's good, but if you want to show brute force attacks over the entire organization, your coverage may be specific to only Windows machines. But if you're a heavy Linux, group, or you've got other operating systems in your environment, coverage may be limited. So that's where it's important to kind of differentiate the two. I think the example that they talk about is for firewalls. If you have a firewall-based use case, well, coverage is great unless not all your traffic is going through a firewall. So from there, you've got some solid things to kind of gauge yourself with, and being able to measure progress and to show, if you have an incredibly effective use case, but maybe it doesn't have wide coverage, well, maybe that gives you kind of the reasoning or the justification to focus on maybe this next development cycle. We're going to release this audit D configuration, or maybe this sysmon configuration out to a wider audience, something like that. So what does this look like? So, we've talked conceptually about MITRE ATT&CK and how attack is the framework of all the ways that bad people are going to do things to us. Now we've kind of got an understanding of how we're going to do the almost project management side of use case development, but what is the output of this? What does this look like? And so that's where atomic threat coverage comes in. So atomic threat coverage is a completely open source project that exists out there. It exists on GitHub, and we have adopted this with open arms because it is a great place to start. The Splunk nomenclature associated with this, a detection rule would be like a correlated search in enterprise security, or it's basically the search, the search logic. But it gives you all of the other kind of parts and pieces that are needed. So that's why they call it atomic, is it's a bunch of little pieces that fit together into a bigger picture. So you first start off with a detection rule. And so the detection rule very closely matches the use case that's in MaGMa. So if you're developing a use case for Windows brute force attacks, well, now your detection rule is going to be something along the lines of Windows brute force attacks. And that, like I said, that's like the correlated search in Splunk. But atomic threat coverage is an agnostic framework. And so they've leveraged Sigma, which is a SIM agnostic query language, to create those detection rules. But the Sigma project itself actually has the facilities to output those queries that are written in its native kind of query language and output that into the Splunk query language, or SPL. So it does a very good job of taking a basic atomic rule or an atomic detection and outputting it into a Splunk readable format. The other nice thing about that, though, is that we are able to share across the cybersecurity community an agnostic query that then the rest of the community can output into their own SIM tools, or it even outputs into grep. So if you don't even have a SIM yet and you're just running grep commands through your logs, it will output that as well. And then, most importantly, is the data needed. So one of the things that always gets me is when it comes to sales pitches of saying it just works, or we can detect that, or some of those things that you probably hear from time to time, is what data do you actually need in order to see the efficacy of that tool or of that use case? So Richard Nixon said, "Tell them to send anything that can fly," and this was back when he was talking to Kissinger about moving military hardware and assets, and they were trying to get nitnoid around which plane they wanted to use, and Nixon just said, "Well, send everything." And generally, that's what our approach has been to getting data into Splunk for security-specific use cases. And especially if you're on a volume-based licensing, that can be a very large pill to swallow. And so what this allows us to do is it says, in order to detect a Windows brute force attack, I only need, event code IDs 4625 and 4626. For my specific use case, the way that I built that, those are the only two Windows event IDs I need. So from there, now I can justify ingesting the massive amount, or maybe it's not massive, but the bulk of those specific events, now I can justify why I'm ingesting that, as opposed to the kind of traditional use case, which has been, well, just send us everything you've got and then we'll kind of sort through it later. This is a much more kind of strategic and surgical approach to getting data, especially when you get into more complex auditing systems and stuff like that, that can be very verbose. And then the logging policy. The logging policy is literally the instructions that are needed in order to have an administrator configure that system in a way that will get you your desired logs output. So if this is, in a Windows system, adjusting a GPO or something like that, the logging policy is the specific implementation of how to make that happen, or what registry keys need to be set, or if it's sysmon, like what sysmon event code and exceptions and filtering need to exist. And so the logging policy is great because if you have a regular sysadmin who doesn't have much security context in his background, he may not know what he needs to do on the GPO in order to enable the logs that you're looking for. And so the logging policy is that list of instructions. And so that's a really good tool to be able to send different people in the organization to affect what you are trying to accomplish. So once you've created the detection rule, you've got the data that's needed, you've sent off the logging policy to the folks over on the sysadmin team, and they're sending everything that you need. That's great. But how do we verify that the detection rule is actually going to fire when it counts? And that's through the trigger. And so the basis for the trigger on atomic threat coverage is actually atomic red teaming by Red Canary. And so they integrate that, that specific framework directly in there. which is good because that's what we're trying to do. If we want to demonstrate value out of the security products that we're leveraging, we want to validate that, if I deploy Emotet on a VM that's, being monitored, is my security infrastructure actually going to detect that? And so triggers help that process. And by feeding all that data into your SIEM, or in our case, Splunk, we can validate that our detection kind of logic works. We've got the right logs, and now with that trigger, we are seeing that detection rule or that notable event being generated, which is good. That's what we want. Then the next up is, well, okay, so now I've got a notable event. Now what do I do? Well, atomic threat coverage comes up with a good programmatic and very atomic way of addressing playbooks. So a lot of the time when you create a playbook, it's going to have a lot of the same like triage steps into it. So you could call triage a stage. And then when you do deeper investigation and, eradication and response and other things, those are different stages. And so what atomic threat coverage has you do is it creates a playbook, which is made up of many stages, and each stage is made up of many actions. And the nice thing about having it atomic like this is that an action can be assigned to multiple stages and multiple different playbooks. And so that way you're not necessarily repeating yourself. If you've got a programming background, you always want to don't repeat yourself, or a dry methodology. And so the atomic threat coverage kind of helps keep that same method in use case development. And the nice thing about that is, if maybe you have an action that is, you're trying to find out some employee information, maybe you've got like a central repository for payroll information or something like that. And then in the future, you're changing over payroll systems and you need to go to a different source to get that information. Now you're only changing in a single action that exists separate from all these other playbooks. So you update it in one location, then all of the playbooks get updated at the same time. So that's a pretty novel way of approaching playbooks because of, especially in that triage phase, so much of what is done is just repetitive work that the SOC analyst is doing. So it's nice to capture that in a very atomic way and a way that's reusable across the different playbooks. And then prevention, an ounce of cure is worth a pound, or whatever, however that saying goes. The idea here is that through prevention, you can mitigate a lot of what you're detecting. And so the hardening and mitigation policies that are available or available to be documented in atomic threat coverage are a good resource to have on your side. So when, if you're seeing an increase in brute force attacks, well, maybe your hardening system for that is enable two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So that would be a hardening step. If you're seeing a lot of PHP vulnerabilities executed on your network or in your organization, well, then the mitigation for that could be like a web application firewall or something like that. So hardening is the configurations or kind of the things that you can do to policy and to the system itself. Mitigation is generally the systems that you can put in place to prevent that from occurring in the future. And again, so all of these different atomic pieces fall up into the detection rule, which then falls up into a use case in MaGMa, which is then associated directly to MITRE ATT&CK. So what's next? So the great thing about open source frameworks is just like your adversary or your enemy is crowdsourcing the work to attack you. Now we can crowdsource a lot of the use case development, a lot of these frameworks. We can crowdsource it across the cybersecurity groups that exist, not only in your, maybe in your sector, but in Splunk working groups and things like this. Being able to share ideas and common, common prevention methods is a great way to kind of like crowdsource that information or crowdsource that workload across a massive number of people, and everyone benefits from that. So if you take a look at the Sigma repository, there's over I think it's about almost 300 different use cases that the Sigma team has already come up with, and those are freely available. So The con of that though is that it may take a little bit of finessing to get it up and running in your specific environment. A lot of what is done very generic, and so thresholds and things like that may not apply to you. If you're a large, data center type place, someone brute forcing an FTP account may, your threshold for that could be in the like thousands per hour. Whereas if you're a smaller organization, well, maybe your threshold for brute forcing your FTP server is, 5 per hour, something like that. So, it takes a little bit of configuration to make it work for you specifically, but the great thing about that is that, if you open up those issues on GitHub or the other code repositories out there, guaranteed someone is excited to start working on that. And so especially when it comes to atomic threat coverage, people are contributing to that on a daily basis. And same with Sigma, they're just coming up with new use cases daily. And all of those are readily available and readily exportable into a Splunk search. And they've now implemented the output into dashboards as well. So that's pretty cool. And they're constantly improving based on community contribution. So the biggest thing, is it's open source. You're able to get the community surrounding a problem. You have multiple viewpoints of that problem. And that's really good in cybersecurity, so we don't kind of get ourselves into a mental rut of how we want to approach something. And like I mentioned, some of the contributions may not be pertinent to your environment, but that's okay. They're probably pertinent to someone else's. So these are the very high level resources. MITRE ATT&CK, again, is the framework for how we're selecting use cases and what we want to do with those use cases. MaGMa is the metrics, growth metrics, and assessment framework. And that is how we want to measure and kind of do the project management and life cycling around use cases. Atomic threat coverage is all the bits and pieces that go into a specific use case. And then Sigma is the SIM agnostic query language. So you write it in the agnostic query language and you're able to output it into Splunk. But you can also share, with people across the fence who maybe use Elasticsearch, or you've got FireEye and you want to output it into Mandiant and things like that. So for now, I'll open it up to some questions.
Hey, Austin, this is Brad. Really good overview of what you've been working on with the engineering team and with Michael and the SOC. My question is, do we have time today or maybe in the next presentation of giving a specific example of the efforts that have been done between solutions and the SOC, and starting from the MITRE ATT&CK all the way through the use case and then the output into the presentation of our SOAR capability? That would be my 2 cents maybe in the future presentation.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a good topic for a future user group. The goal was to keep this under 30 minutes and I hit about 37. So I have gone slightly over my time. There is definitely a ton of information surrounding these frameworks. There's several SANS white papers speaking to just about every single one of these. So there is a lot of information out there. And then as far as specific implementation goes, definitely something I'd be willing to talk about at a future user group.
Thank you. Great job.
Thanks. Any other questions out there? All right. I know it's a lot of information, but I think it's all definitely good information. I'm a little bit biased towards it. That being said, if you do have any questions or if any questions come up, feel free to email me, austin.rose@state.ca.gov, and I'll try and answer them as much as I can. Otherwise, feel free to bring those questions into the next users group, or feel free to dive right in and start participating and contributing to the open source frameworks that are out there. But if there's nothing else, yep.
Thanks
Gina?
so much for your presentation. I think you did a great job of explaining the process from creating a policy to implementing it. And I think what I'd like to find out is if anyone in the audience has a different process that they're using to create security use cases, or if they use different frameworks, if anyone's willing to unmute themselves and speak about how they use it in their organization. All right, so then I'm assuming most people just use the default correlated searches in ES and probably enable them. So maybe if that would be a great, if anybody would like to chat, and put in your strategy on how you create use cases in the chat, that would be beneficial also. But we're really targeting this Splunk users group so that we can continue to educate each other and use each other and leverage each other's experience and how they use Splunk. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. And so with that, if there's no other questions, or if you want to stew on your questions for a little bit longer, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Blake for the remote work insights presentation.
Great, thanks, Austin. First, a quick comment on content here. Think of 2 dimensions, visualize 2 dimensions. On one dimension, we have kind of categories of products like security, IT operations, DevOps. That's one dimension that we want to cover in this users group meetings and over time. The other dimension is level of experience, crawl, walk, run, beginner, intermediate, advanced. One of my goals is, as one of the leaders in this team, is to make sure we cover the entire, 2-dimensional area, all product areas, security, IT, dev, and others, and all experience levels. So I think that was in the security category, and also maybe at the run level as well. So yeah. Awesome presentation. So I'm going to spend the next, 15, 20 minutes or so covering what we call remote work insights. After that, I'm going to spend maybe, 10 or 15 minutes, depending on time and questions, with tips and tricks of a ton of beginner level stuff I want to share with you guys. So let's first start off with remote work insights. I have a little presentation for that. It's going to be a few slides. Then I'll pop over to our website. Then I'll pop into a live demo in rapid succession. So first off, assuming everyone can see my screen, Remote Work Insights was created by Splunkers, Splunk IT, to give visibility to Splunk executives during the COVID crisis. Everyone's working from home. Splunk, like every other company in the world, needs to quickly transition their workforce to home-based work, and they wanted to make sure that they had visibility, that the transition was going smoothly. So they built these dashboards. We do what Splunk does well, ingest data, and present that data in meaningful ways. We then realized that, hey, this thing that we've created will be useful for any customer, any organization. So we published it. It all came together very quickly, maybe 2.5 months ago. It was released in version kind of 1.0. And it's not just a product. It's not just something an app from the App Store that you install. It's a concept. What it is, it's a curated set of TAs, add-ons, apps, sample visualizations to give customers an idea of how they might want to manage and understand both from a security perspective and from an operations perspective, how is this remote work going? This, while it is an app, you can install this dashboard app. That's not all it is. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What it really is, it's a service that Splunk is providing to customers to get visibility very, very quickly. And by service, I mean that the remote work insights can be deployed on premise for existing Splunk customers, or in the cloud for either existing or new Splunk customers. I say or because this remote work insights can be deployed in days with your live data. We have this process called the Autobahn, and Autobahn is our POC kind of mechanism. What that means is that if you say, a customer says, I need to visualize how my remote workers are doing, talk to Splunk, we could say, okay, we will set up a server for you in the cloud for free for 90 days just to use it as a product. If it's useful, consider buying some capacity in the future. But it's certainly a service for 90 days just for you to use to get over the hump of this COVID crisis. Frequent updates means that we're constantly adding and recurating content for this. I mentioned this already, on-premise versus cloud. Again, it's not just a simple product, it's a concept and an idea. There is an app to download, there's an app to install, but it's more of a concept and an idea, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Here's some samples of what it looks like. So I'll go through some screenshots. Notice also this says app Microsoft 365. When I say curated content, we're going to recommend what apps in our app store might kind of plug in nicely to this remote work insights kind of concept. And things like the Microsoft 365 app is absolutely one of them. So you'll see in some of our demos, you'll see screenshots for 365, for Zoom, for RWI. So all together makes the complete RWI kind of concept. So if you do decide to try this out on Splunk Cloud, it's called an Audubon lane. And an Audubon lane has a kind of a preset list of vendors that we can work with very, very quickly. So the red box in the upper left-hand corner is kind of what comes out of the box with the Audubon lane, with the cloud trial of this remote work insight solution. So if you see your vendors here, great, it'll work just with just simple configuration. If you see these other vendors not inside the box, we can absolutely connect these. This is what I mean by curated. All of these vendors, all these logos we see, we think fit very, very nicely into remote work insights set of dashboards. So Splunk uses Okta, and Splunk uses Palo Alto and Slack. So you'll see a lot of those vendors kind of vetted and authorized or proven to work well with this remote work insights framework. I think I'm going to pop maybe one last slide. I'm going to pop into maybe the last slide and show it's also mobile. Skipping ahead here. So everything, all the screenshots I showed before are all from desktops. Here are some screenshots of looking at this content, these dashboards from the mobile app. And I can't really see my list of participants right now, but on that, if you're looking at the participants list, there's a button that says yes, no, go faster. Give me a yes. Give me a yes if you have used already or if you've played with the Splunk mobile application to view any kind of your Splunk content. Are we getting any kind of interaction there, guys? Lily, Eugenia, is anyone saying yes or no?
I'm not seeing any yeses.
Okay. Just want to let you know that it's out there in the mobile app.
Actually, we
you
have
should play
one
with that.
One
All right, good. All right, let's pop over to the website to show you more information, kind of a self-service kind of place. So this is a PowerPoint presentation that I could send out if you'd like it. But if you want to learn more information about RWI, it's available on our website. So Splunk.com, I'll start from. So on Splunk.com, there's a COVID-19 response item, upper right-hand corner. Click on that. Message from our CEO, Splunk is a philanthropic kind of organization. We're trying to help people get through this organization or this problem, this COVID problem. One of the ways we're doing that is with RWI, Remote Work Insights. So click on that overview, and it kind of tells you a little bit more about what it is. So I'm showing you this so you can know where to go after this presentation. If you want to go learn more about this, dive deeper, this would be a great place for you to start to learn more yourself, or contact one of us, one of your local SEs for a deeper dive. I want to point out the second menu item here under the remote work sites menu, and that is kind of the pre-vetted or curated list of TAs and apps that we think are going to work well with this. Scrolling down, there's two categories. If you want to look at this from an IT perspective, IT operations perspective, these are the apps. If you look at it from a security perspective, because again, there's two perspectives to manage your remote workforce, IT operations or security, there's two kind of categories here. So again, scroll through these lists and you'll kind of see the list of apps that Splunk thinks, could be useful in managing remote workforce. Now we're getting to the bottom. Now we're getting to some of the security solutions, kind of TAs and apps. Make sense? One last thing I'll point out is there is a nice little solution brief. This is a nice PDF document. I think I have it uploaded right here. So it's a nice little, 10-page document that talks about the details in PDF format of remote, what it is. The first 4 slides are marketing slides, kind of showing you screenshots and defining what it is. But the last set of pages, not slide, last set of pages relates to the Autobahn Remote Work Insights process, where you choose which of these, vendors that you want to use for this Autobahn 90-day, POC evaluation. And the word evaluation is kind of a misnomer because we're giving you the software for 90 days just to use it as you own it. If you like it, you buy it at the end or you don't buy it at the end, your choice. But for 90 days, you could just use it as if it were your own. And that's what this Autobahn COVID-19 project is about. Last thing I want to do is pop into a live demo. So this is a live running RWI dashboard and on our demo system. This is not real Splunk data from the real live Splunk, dashboards that executives see. That's kind of private and confidential. So this is just all sample data that customers, SEs can show customers. So there's a set of dashboards involved. The dashboards are all linked together, so you can start at the high level dashboard, the overview, and then drill into detail. The upper left-hand corner is simply, quantity. How many active VPN sessions are there? Just below that, the logins. Were they successful or unsuccessful? So if I want to see a trend, green means successful VPN login, red means unsuccessful. So the line is kind of the trend of the ratio of unsuccessful to successful. So if I am an IT operations person, if this line is flat, pretty high at 95%, that looks good to me. But if it drops like this data point in the last, just today, that's a problem. I want to be alerted on that. So maybe I throw a Splunk alert on this to tell me when this percentage drops below 80%. The middle section is about Zoom or Teams or WebEx, whatever your video conferencing vendor of choice is. How many active meetings are there? How many Zoom meetings have there been? Again, pattern over time, trend over time. What are my workforce, what are they doing? What applications are they using? Looks like the most popular one today is Zoom. But historically, on this chart below it, I'm seeing that in the past, Zoom is the most popular today, but yesterday looks like it was ServiceNow. Or not yesterday, but that's today. Yesterday looks like it was Salesforce was the most popular app. So I can see over time what my popular apps are. So again, spikes mean problem that may need to be investigated. Then down below is simply a map. This is a worldwide demo, so it shows everyone worldwide. Hopefully with my California-based customers, it'll just be a map of California with cities and counties in this area with much more detail than, than the worldwide map. Now, I mentioned this is an overview dashboard. If I click on some of these things, like I click on the active VPN sessions, I'm gonna drill in to the VPN deep dive. So now I'm going to see things like, well, besides the map, which is just kind of redisplayed, I'll see things like, the details of location, countries, and cities. Again, based on your granularity, maybe you want to see zip codes or cities where your workers are coming from. I know California agencies have workers all up and down the California, so this might be a map of California showing your distribution across the region. Success or failure pie chart, reasons for login failures, invalid username or password, common IT operations problem, of course, and then some other problem that might need to be investigated. This is simply, a starting point. Like every other dashboard in Splunk, this can be modified, tuned, fiddled with, tweaked to meet your needs. Like if I want to look at this pie chart right here, I can simply go into the SPL used to create this pie chart, tweak it to meet my needs, and then, save this back, modify. Everything I'm showing you here today can be modified, tweaked, moved around, made to better work with your organization. This is not the be-all, end-all dashboard. It's simply a starting point to get you started and to kind of build some interest initially, before you have time to customize it. Going back to the main page, I can drill into the next two sections as well. Zoom meetings. So for collaboration tools, I want to see the number of active participants, longest, median, shortest meeting times, over time. What's the most popular times for these meetings? Looks like the meetings over time is the right-hand dashboard or the right-hand chart over here. Certainly 7 a.m., 10 a.m. are spikes in meeting times. How these meetings being started. Instant meeting versus scheduled meeting versus recurring meeting. What are my users dialing in from? What device are they joining these meetings from? Windows, Mac, iPhone. You get the idea. Yeah, so I don't want to go too deep here. I just want to give you guys a quick peek of what all is available, and then leave plenty of time for questions about this. Just a quick, I won't mention names or customers, but I know several state agencies are already, looking into building dashboards like this. I've seen several already that either use this or they built their own before they knew this was available. So I think this is a great area for collaboration within the users group meeting, is to figure out, who is, leading the charge, who's more advanced in this, what departments or agencies are more advanced, and then have maybe have some volunteers to show their implementation of this in future meetings or any other kind of interesting, use case that you might want to pop into. So I want to pause here and challenge you guys. Be brave. Press that space bar. Ask questions. Tell me if you either already using this or using something similar, or yada yada yada. Who's my first brave volunteer? Crowdsource. In terms of crowdsource, Gina, Lily, anyone else, what did I miss? What are some other important concepts about RWI that you want to bring up? I just thought of one that I just missed. So one point is, where can you get this RWI dashboard? It's on Splunk Base. So if you search for Remote Work Insights, it's an app on Splunk Base, and it's basically just what you're seeing here.
Blake, I've got one thing for you. At Department of Technology, we did deploy the RWI app, and what we found was, even in the time of COVID and quarantine, we found a couple people logging in from places that definitely weren't California. So
oh yeah,
people that were internationally and things like that, they were brought up as potential security concerns, since travel's been stopped. But from the security standpoint, there's a lot of really kind of nifty security context around some of the data that it's presenting as well.
That is a true statement for any kind of Splunk investigation. Finding out the location of where your requests, where your users are coming from, oftentimes shocks people. Yeah. Were you able to identify those as malicious, or sometimes, we've heard that what's the technology, either VPN technology or some other kind of location masking technology can use to obfuscate where users are coming from. If a user doesn't want to be, geolocated, they can hide themselves. Have you found that to be the case sometimes?
I haven't had direct interaction with a lot of those investigations, and to be honest, I haven't taken the time to follow up on them. But I would presume that most of them were legitimate, since we leverage Okta for a lot of the data.
Yeah.
But we're also using Azure's ADFS as well to manage some of that.
Okay. Awesome. That's as far as I want to go with the RWI, but I did prepare a few more, just 2 more slides at the beginner level. So I want to cover all levels of needs here for this first meeting, and also leave plenty of time to collaborate to talk about future meetings. But this is a couple slides I showed during most of my Splunk overviews. The first one is very generic. What are some common, community-based websites? And I'm sure most of you know most of these, but I want to point out a few cool things that maybe you don't know in some of these. I'll start off with Answers. Answers got rebuilt just about 2 weeks ago. We took the concept of community and redid both the users group community, the answers, and a lot of other stuff, and folded it under this community.splunk.com. So the look and feel changed to Answers, but it's the same concept. So I want to really encourage everyone to spend a lot of time on Answers. It's basically our question and answer, threaded discussion, kind of forum. Very popular, tons of knowledge. Both our customers and our employees post and respond to these answers. So rather than calling tech support or, calling your SE, just make sure you know about this Splunk Answers. Splunk events. We, as SEs, are giving tons of workshops. These are hands-on mini training sessions from 2 to 4 hours long. Almost all of them have a lab component. That means we're going to give you a login to a Splunk server, and the Splunk server might be for Phantom, for ES, for just core Splunk, for ITSI. So we have workshops going on every single week, several per week, as a matter of fact, across all product lines and all levels of experience. So if you want to participate in some of those, customers love these. They're not selling events. They're simply events for you guys to get hands-on with more products and, learn about our products, period. Developer resources, I'm going to point that out, because does everyone know that every Splunk customer can request a developer, or what I call a non-production version of Splunk Enterprise? It's a license you can request, and you just download it from this. How I usually find it is just do a Google search. Splunk dev license. Type in that Google search. The top one it's usually the top one. If your email ID is associated with, is known by us, if you're an authorized Splunk user or contact, then that will enable you to request this development license. This is a full 50 gig license, daily ingest of Splunk that could be run on a single server, like a laptop or a server. It just can't be a big multi-server cluster environment. The license itself is for 6 months, but it's free to renew at 6-month term. We just want to make sure that you're still using it, so we'll give you a new license every 6 months. Good for playing around, good for development, learning, good for testing new apps, good for migration or upgrade planning and implementation. So I want to make sure everyone knows about that kind of Splunk dev license. Documentation.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do you guys have any plans to decouple that dev test license from basically the corporate email addresses, so the association with the corporation.
That's a good question. And right now, these are for Splunk customers. You have to be a customer to get this free, this non-production license. This is Alex speaking, right?
That is correct.
Hey, Alex. So yeah, let me take that offline, and I'll see if Lily or Gina, unless you know the answer off the top of your heads, Lily or Gina, do we have any kind of non-customer based licenses of Splunk that are for training or for
just the 30-day that you would get when you download the software?
Yeah, that makes sense. So anybody in the world can download Splunk, install it, and they get a 30-day license, which can be extended. If you call Splunk and talk to them and say, hey, I want to try for another 30 days, we'll say yes. But it's not really meant for long-term, learning and enablement. That dev license is the key thing. Yeah, that's.
Now, every site is entitled to 3 users. So if you, what I find is a lot of customers don't have all their users registered. So if you want to register your users, make sure that you have at least 3 users that can call in, and those are the users I believe that can get the dev license.
Yeah, good point. So if you have any spare unused slots, Splunk entitled users, then each of those users could be, would be entitled to 1 more license. Okay, documentation. Everyone knows about our doc, but did you know that as one of the documentation areas is not just reference material, but reference guides, but also search tutorials. This is a tutorial style manual. It's more like a lab manual. It's a step-by-step, click here, click there, teaching and showing you how to do things in a manual. So a lot of these concepts would be covered from our training manual, our training guides like Fundamentals 1, Fundamentals 2, Fundamentals 3, but I would make sure everyone knows there's this tutorial section within documentation as well. So it's not just reference guides, it's also some tutorials built in. Now, that's what I show to every customer. And I created this was a kind of a curation of other, non-Splunk stuff that I think customers could use. First off is cheat sheets. I love cheat sheets. If I go to this partner, Plura, they've published, 6 or 7, 8 different cheat sheets. Let's look at data onboarding. These are PDF documents that are kept up to date with, detailed syntax. How do you do something? Here's the exact syntax. Just a 2 or 3 page document for all these documents. I've printed these out. I use them. My customers find them very, very useful. So I want to make sure that that you know about these as well. The next is a Slack channel. Do you guys know that there's a publicly available Slack channel or Slack server for Splunk users groups? And on this users group, kind of Slack group, there are channels. Where do I ask? Announcements, best practices, bucket lists, certifications, and these are active. So I would say there's a little bit of overlap between this and answers, but I would be aware of both of them. And just do a Google search for Splunk Slack users groups, and you'll find this this link. Again, it's very active, a lot of comments and conversations worldwide. Next one is Go Splunk. Who's heard of Go Splunk before? So Go Splunk is a repository, a knowledge base of SPL commands. There's hundreds of, maybe thousands of these SPL commands that have been cataloged in here. At first, I thought this was an older website, but no. There's 2020. There's posts and information that are updated just recently. So this is not an old dead website. Even if it were, though, there's a lot of information here because historically, what a great SPL command 5 years ago is still a great SPL command today. So don't be afraid of something that says, here's list of indexes from 2015. That still works, man. It's still a great little hunk of SPL to use. So don't be concerned about date here. Does anyone use this? Give me a yes or no if you have ever used this go Splunk before. Okay, next is the Splunk. The Splunk quick reference guides. We have a couple of them. We have the SPL guide. We also have a dashboard guide. If you've ever attended any of our workshops locally, we pass these out as nice tri-fold, thick stock cards to our customers and attendees. It's also available via downloads. If you want to download it, print it out yourself, here it is. A great document. Two more, then I'll wrap it up, guys. Next is Exploring Splunk book. I read this book. I was a new employee about a year ago, and I found this book very useful. It's also dated, but again, SPL is SPL. All the concepts in this absolutely are still applicable today. David Crusoe is the one of the founding, the thought leaders of SPL back when Splunk was a very, very small company. But I've read this book. I can endorse it. It's a useful book to learn SPL. Again, there are other ways of learning SPL, like the fundamentals classes, the tutorial and documentation I saw you, but some folks like this book style format. So I put it on my iPad. I read it at night, just kind of reading in bed. It was a very good book to go through. Free download. And lastly, GitHub. GitHub is where we publish a lot of developer type stuff, Python libraries. Who knows about our what's it called? Boss of the NOC data sets. Somewhere in here, we publish these huge multi-gigabyte data sets. We don't publish the current one because the current one contains what we use for current competitions. So we don't want people to use the data set that we use for boss of the NOC or boss of the SOC competitions. But previous year's data sets are available for training and for playing around with a realistic, real world, data set for Splunk, either IT operations or security kind of use cases. So this is our GitHub site. Just want to quickly catalog those. I will post this this PowerPoint presentation to the Sacramento Splunk Users Group site. By the way, that site is also a repository for documents and contents. I think we're going to plan on publishing the video of this recording of this meeting to that site, to the Splunk Users Group, Sacramento Splunk Users Group site, along with the slides that we showed today, at least the slides I showed today. And we can just form a community there as well. I'll be quiet, and I guess I would have first asked for a favor. Be brutally, frankly honest. Was this content useful or not useful? Because we want to use this information to gauge what kind of content you do want to see in future meetings. So I'm going to stop my sharing so I can see the comments, or just thumbs up, thumbs down. Give us some sort of feedback of how useful the last 30 minutes have been. Here's where I beg for your feedback. Don't just sit back there and watch, participate. See a couple. Anyone else? All right, awesome. That's all the content I had today. I think you wanted to talk about future meetings, and I'm gonna also beg, ask, plead for customers to be involved in the leadership. We have a committee of Splunk Users Group meetings. Right now, it's us three SEs, me, Gina, Lily, and one customer, Austin. We'd like one or two additional customers, not to present every time, just to be involved in the planning, the content. What date do we pick for meetings? Who are our speakers? Just kind of the logistics. It's a great way to get your name out there and be seen as a thought leader in the Sacramento Splunk community.
Thanks, Blake. Maybe we can terminate the recording and just open it up for some, non-recorded discussion.
Yeah.
Just in the event anyone's apprehensive about